See, that's a part of the sickness in America, that you have to think in terms of who wins, who loses, who's good, who's bad, who's best, who's worst. We always think in those terms, in the extreme terms. I don't like to think that way. Everybody has their own value in a different way, and I don't like to think.
Old Hollywood had a dark side that most people never saw. Behind the smiles, the red carpets, and the flashing lights, some actors were out of control. These men weren't just stars. They were wild, reckless, and dangerous. They lived fast, partied hard, and left destruction in their wake. Today, we're revealing 20 of the most dangerous actors from the golden age of Hollywood. Their behavior was so outrageous, it would have ended their careers today. Some were violent, some were addicts, and some even had deadly secrets. Let's dive into this shocking list. 20. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn was the golden boy of swashbuckling films, but off-screen, he was dangerous, wild, and unpredictable. Known for his charming looks and reckless lifestyle, Flynn was constantly surrounded by scandal. He drank excessively, partied endlessly, and had a long history of affairs, many involving young women. In 1942, he was charged with statutory rape, though he was eventually acquitted. Still, his reputation never fully recovered. Flynn's behavior grew more erratic as his addictions deepened. He often showed up drunk on set, fought with directors, and was rumored to have violent outbursts. Despite his fame, his personal life spiraled into chaos. He lived fast and burned through his fortune with no concern for consequences. His health collapsed in his 40s due to alcohol and drug abuse. By the time he died at 50, Flynn had become a cautionary tale in Hollywood about charm turned toxic. 19. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando was a powerhouse on screen, but off-screen, he was volatile, secretive, and deeply troubled. He changed Hollywood with his raw, emotional acting, but his personal life was a series of emotional storms. Brando had a violent temper and often clashed with directors and producers. His relationships were chaotic, and he fathered at least 11 children with different women. At home, he was reportedly controlling and distant. The darkest chapter came when his son, Christian, was involved in the killing of his sister's boyfriend. Brando broke down in court, admitting that his neglect contributed to the tragedy. His family was plagued by addiction, violence, and heartbreak. On set, he could be either brilliant or impossible. He refused to memorize lines and bullied co-stars. Though he remains a Hollywood icon, Brando's life was marked by pain, rage, and emotional destruction that shocked everyone who knew him. 18. Robert Mitchum. Robert Mitchum had the cool swagger of a movie tough guy, but in real life, he was a ticking time bomb. Known for his rugged charm and sleepy-eyed look, Mitchum lived by his own rules and often got in trouble with the law. In 1948, he was arrested in a Hollywood drug bust and spent time in jail for marijuana possession, a scandal that could have ended his career. But instead of hiding, Mitchum embraced his outlaw image. He drank heavily, picked fights in bars, and was constantly surrounded by chaos. Directors described him as both brilliant and dangerous, never knowing when he'd explode. Mitchum once said he didn't care what people thought, and he meant it. He mocked the Hollywood system, insulted executives, and lived recklessly. Despite his success, he never stopped pushing limits. Mitchum's unpredictable behavior made him feared in the industry, yet his legend only grew darker. 17. Montgomery Clift. Montgomery Clift was one of Hollywood's most gifted actors, but behind his haunting eyes was a life filled with suffering and destruction. He started as a rising star, known for his emotional depth and brooding looks. but tragedy shattered him. In 1956, Clift was in a horrific car crash that left his face disfigured. After the accident, he became addicted to painkillers and alcohol. His behavior changed completely. He grew paranoid, reclusive, and difficult to work with. Friends described him as a ghost of the man he once was. On set, he would break down or lash out without warning. He was consumed by guilt, self-hatred, and pain. His once promising career turned into a slow, heartbreaking decline. Clift died young, at 45, after years of self-destruction. His story is one of the most tragic in Hollywood. A brilliant star who couldn't escape his demons and lived in constant emotional torment. 16. Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy was one of Hollywood's most respected actors, but his private life was filled with rage, addiction, and emotional chaos. Known for his powerful performances and quiet intensity, Tracy battled alcoholism for most of his life. He often drank until he blacked out, then woke up with no memory of the destruction he caused. On set, he could be violent and unpredictable. He once destroyed a hotel room during a drunken outburst, leaving staff terrified. Though he had a long romantic relationship with Katharine Hepburn, he refused to leave his wife, creating a life filled with guilt and emotional strain. Tracy's drinking made him unreliable, and producers sometimes had to delay filming just to sober him up. Despite the praise he received on screen, his personal life was marked by torment. He was a man at war with himself, and the damage he caused never fully healed. 15. James Dean. James Dean became a symbol of rebellion, but his real-life behavior was reckless and often frightening. Behind his cool image was a young man with deep anger and a thirst for danger. He drove at terrifying speeds, often racing through the streets with no care for safety. Friends warned him to slow down, but he refused. Dean had mood swings, clashed with directors, and acted out on set. He once stormed off a film shoot after a violent argument with the crew. His relationships were short and intense, filled with emotional explosions. He lived like he was running from something, always pushing limits. Dean's obsession with death was well known, and he even joked he would die young. Tragically, he was right. At just 24, he was killed in a high-speed car crash. His death shocked Hollywood, and his dangerous lifestyle became part of his dark and unforgettable legacy. 14. Burt Lancaster. Burt Lancaster had the smile of a leading man, but his temper could ignite without warning. He started out as a circus acrobat before becoming a Hollywood star, and he carried that physical toughness into every part of his life. On screen, he played heroes and villains with intensity. Off-screen, he was known for being aggressive, controlling, and sometimes violent. Crew members feared his outbursts, and directors struggled to manage his ego. Lancaster had a fierce competitive streak, and wasn't afraid to humiliate co-stars if he felt threatened. His personal life was chaotic, filled with affairs and broken relationships. He demanded absolute loyalty from those around him, and when betrayed, he exploded. Even in business, he ruled with an iron fist, clashing with studios and leaving a trail of resentment. Lancaster may have been a respected actor, but his dark behavior left scars that many in Hollywood never forgot. 13. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra was a music legend, but in Hollywood, he was also feared for his explosive temper and dangerous connections. Known for his charm and style, Sinatra had a darker side that few dared to cross. He was quick to anger and often lashed out at reporters, crew members, and even close friends. He had ties to organized crime and was rumored to use those connections to intimidate people who got in his way. Directors often tiptoed around him, knowing that one wrong word could lead to a violent confrontation. Sinatra's drinking only fueled his rage, and he was notorious for public meltdowns. He destroyed hotel rooms, attacked photographers, and was banned from multiple venues. His personal life was a whirlwind of affairs and jealous fits. Though his talent was undeniable, Sinatra's behavior kept everyone on edge. He wasn't just a performer. He was a man who could explode at any moment. 12th. Peter O'Toole. Peter O'Toole was as wild off-screen as he was captivating on it. Known for his role in Lawrence of Arabia, O'Toole lived like a man with no rules. He drank so heavily that it became part of his legend. Friends described nights with him that spiraled into chaos, filled with broken glass, shouting, and unpredictable behavior. He once drank himself into a coma and had to undergo surgery that nearly killed him. Even after that, he didn't stop. On set, he was brilliant but unstable. Directors had to work around his hangovers and unpredictable moods. He often showed up late or disappeared for days. His wild behavior wasn't just about drinking. He had a sharp tongue and made powerful enemies with his insults. O'Toole's life was one long, dangerous party that often teetered on the edge of disaster. Though admired for his talent, many feared the destruction that followed him everywhere. 11. Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis was a Hollywood heartthrob with a smile that lit up the screen. But behind the charm was a man caught in self-destruction. At the height of his fame, Curtis became obsessed with drugs and sex, living a fast-paced life that spiraled out of control. He was addicted to cocaine, heroin, and alcohol, which fueled wild behavior and emotional breakdowns. Curtis bragged about his countless affairs, even during his high-profile marriage to Janet Leigh. His ego grew with his fame, and he became difficult to work with. Directors complained about his mood swings and diva-like demands. He often stormed off set or refused to follow instructions. At home, he was just as unstable, isolating himself and falling deeper into addiction. His reckless lifestyle nearly destroyed his career. Though he made a late comeback, the damage was done. Curtis's charm masked years of chaos that haunted him until his final days. 10. George C. Scott. George C. Scott was a brilliant actor, but his violent temper and deep drinking problem made him one of the most feared men in Hollywood. Best known for his role in Patton, Scott brought the same intensity to real life. He was known to scream at directors, threaten producers, and physically intimidate anyone who challenged him. His drinking often triggered dangerous outbursts. On one occasion, he destroyed an entire dressing room after a disagreement. Crew members walked on eggshells around him, never knowing what would set him off. His marriages were just as stormy. He married actress Colleen Dewhurst twice, and both times the relationship ended in disaster due to his unpredictable behavior. Despite his immense talent, Scott's rage made him difficult to work with. Studios tolerated him because of his skill, but many feared him behind the scenes. He was a man with a burning fire inside, impossible to control. 9. Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen was the ultimate symbol of cool, but his off-screen life was full of danger, rage, and wild rebellion. Nicknamed the King of Cool, McQueen lived like he was invincible. He had a troubled childhood and carried that anger into adulthood. He constantly clashed with directors and producers, demanding control and often threatening to walk off set. McQueen had a short fuse and wasn't afraid to fight. He once punched a crew member during an argument and regularly got into bar brawls. He raced cars and motorcycles at high speeds, ignoring safety and risking his life for thrills. He also struggled with substance abuse, using drugs and drinking heavily to cope with fame and pressure. McQueen's relationships were chaotic. marked by jealousy and control. Behind the charm was a man always on the edge. His dangerous lifestyle and fiery temper turned him into a legend, both loved and feared. 8. Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper was a walking storm of chaos, drugs, and raw talent. His early promise as an actor was soon overshadowed by his destructive behavior. Hopper became infamous for his out-of-control lifestyle, filled with heavy drug use, wild parties, and violent outbursts. He reportedly drank a case of beer a day and consumed cocaine constantly. During the filming of Apocalypse Now, his behavior was so erratic that the crew feared working with him. He screamed at co-stars, vanished for days, and showed up high on set. His personal life was just as wild. He was married 5 times, and one wife took out a restraining order after accusing him of abuse. Hopper once lived in the desert with loaded guns, convinced he was being watched. Though he eventually got clean and made a career comeback, his earlier years left a trail of destruction. Hollywood never forgot how dangerous Dennis Hopper could be. 7. Oliver Reed. Oliver Reed was a force of nature both on and off the screen, known for his ferocious talent and even more ferocious temper. He was one of Britain's most intense actors, but his reputation for violence and drinking made him a nightmare behind the scenes. Reed could go from charming to terrifying in seconds. He often drank heavily before, during, and after filming, leading to unpredictable and explosive behavior. On multiple occasions, he physically attacked fellow actors and crew members in drunken rages. He once challenged an entire bar to a fight, injuring several people before being dragged out. His marriages were filled with turmoil, and his affairs only added to the chaos. Reed's battles with addiction and anger nearly destroyed his career. Even late in life, he continued drinking until his final days. He died of a heart attack in a bar while trying to outdrink sailors. A wild end to a wild life. 6. Richard Burton. Richard Burton was a Shakespearean genius with a volcanic temper and a thirst for destruction. His powerful voice and intense stare made him one of Hollywood's most celebrated actors. But behind the brilliance was a man consumed by alcohol and chaos. Burton drank heavily every day, starting from the morning, often arriving on set drunk or hungover. His relationship with Elizabeth Taylor was legendary for its love, but also for its violence and public fights. The two screamed at each other in luxury hotels, smashed furniture, and shocked everyone around them. Burton insulted directors, mocked co-stars, and once got into a fistfight with a crew member over a costume. He spent millions on booze, jewels, and reckless living. His behavior cost him roles and destroyed his health. Despite his fame and fortune, Burton's life was a slow collapse. The man who mesmerized audiences on stage was battling demons no one could tame. 5. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando was a revolutionary actor, but his personal life was a whirlwind of anger, violence, and shocking decisions. He hated authority and often refused to follow rules, clashing with directors and producers on nearly every project. On the set of Apocalypse Now, he arrived overweight, unprepared, and refused to learn his lines, causing chaos and delays. Brando was known for mood swings and outbursts, unless major scenes were rewritten. His relationships were full of turmoil, marked by affairs, jealousy, and emotional explosions. Behind the scenes, his life was deeply troubled. His son was convicted of murder, and his daughter died by suicide, events that shattered Brando emotionally. He withdrew from Hollywood, becoming isolated and bitter. Though considered one of the greatest actors in history, Brando's legacy is also one of destruction and pain. He was a genius lost in his own storm of chaos. 4. Robert Mitchum. Robert Mitchum had a cool, relaxed image on screen, but off-screen, he was a magnet for trouble. Known for his deep voice and sleepy eyes, Mitchum lived a life full of danger, rebellion, and raw defiance. In 1948, he was famously arrested for marijuana possession, shocking Hollywood and nearly ending his career. Instead of hiding it, Mitchum shrugged it off, making him seem even more dangerous and unpredictable. He often clashed with directors, ignored instructions, and sometimes disappeared from set without warning. Mitchum had a violent streak and once got into a brawl with a reporter who questioned his choices. He drank heavily, partied endlessly, and had a long history of affairs. Crew members said he was impossible to control, and often pushed boundaries just to see how far he could go. Behind the calm face was a man burning with rebellion, living every day on the edge. 3. Klaus Kinski. Klaus Kinski was one of the most terrifying actors in film history, both on and off the screen. Known for his explosive performances, his real-life behavior was even more extreme. Directors, co-stars, and crew members feared working with him. He screamed during filming, insulted everyone around him, and often refused to follow scripts. His most famous collaborator, Werner Herzog, once claimed he considered killing Kinski on set because his behavior was so dangerous. Kinski threw fits of rage so violent that people ran from the set. He broke props, trashed dressing rooms, and threatened anyone who disagreed with him. Off-screen, his personal life was even darker. He was accused of horrific abuse by family members, including his own daughter. Kinski's madness wasn't an act. He lived in a constant state of fury, and his presence felt like a ticking time bomb. Hollywood never saw anyone more unstable or more feared. 2. James Cagney.